Hi, this is Bob Sorrentino from Italian Roots and Genealogy, and I'm here today with Linda Rovetti-Goldstein, and we're going to talk about her research and her family. So, welcome, Linda. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Um, so, um, when and why did you start doing your research?
First of all, love to travel, but I've also been to Italy 5 times. And I really knew very little of my father's background because he really didn't talk about it. And as kids, you don't ask.
Right.
And it became just a curiosity and really a joke with my sister and I, like, well, maybe we should see if we qualify for dual citizenship. And that just started the ball rolling. And we found out that we were eligible, and that unveiled a story that I never knew about my father. We only knew that his one of his parents died, and his mother took him back to Italy. He was a year and a half. He ended up living in an orphanage until what we were told. They found out he really was born in Hoboken, New Jersey. He was an American citizen, and they sent him back right before the war. And that was basically all we knew. Since then, I've gotten profound compassion for the life and the losses that my father had along the way, with both of his parents dying, raised in an orphanage. I find out his name was not really Charles, it was Collergio. I don't know how you say that in Italian. And that his birth year was not 1920, it was 1918. And the kicker was that he's one of 10 children. I only knew of two siblings.
Wow, that's some story. So your grandparents came here.
Yes,
And
my grandfather was married to a woman in Italy named Brania. And in 1906, he came to the United States in Hoboken. They had 2 children. In 1909, and this is where it gets a little vague, she's on a manifest that she and her 2 children come over to be with him, but their names are crossed off. A cousin that I found said that he was always told that she had an eye condition and she was turned away. Not really sure. The following year, the 2 little kids come over, her 2 children come over. One of them is held in a special inquiry, and the little boy is sent back to Italy again, and he's only like 7 years old. 3 months later, he comes across by himself. So that's the first part of my story. The second part of the story is my grandmother came to the United States to marry a gentleman named Giuseppe, and they had 4 children. He died in 1912. Okay. This is the part that's really vague. We don't know what happened to my grandfather's first wife, except that Fabrania and my grandmother Conchetta were sisters. And that's when the story started to piece together. And so my grandfather and my grandmother had their first child in 1913. What I don't know and what I cannot find, and I have been trying, is a marriage certificate for both of my grandparents. And I don't know, we can't seem to find the death record for her sister, my aunt, because she went back to Italy and there's no record of her coming back across here. So did she die and then my grandparents got married? I don't know. They had 4 children, and she had 4 children. So altogether there were 10. One passed away. So my grandparents, in 1918, my grandfather, who was never naturalized, he was still an Italian citizen, was registered for the war, World War I. And it turns out that he was in a TB hospital in Secaucus, New Jersey, where he died. He died, so my father was 3 months old when he died. Mm-hmm. The following year, my grandmother took her 4 children and the 3 Rovettos back across to Italy to her town. The 2 older children stayed in Hoboken. I don't know the answer to this question either. She dies 2 years later from TB. I don't know when the 3 the three siblings when they were put in an orphanage? Was it right away when she went back to her town in Patti, or was it when she died? The three children, the oldest, his sister, was put in a home, and she was like a nursemaid. She was 6 years old. They didn't send her to school. The middle brother, my mother always told us that he was like in the street. Nobody really wanted to take him in. And eventually he ended up in an orphanage as well. And my father. So I did find out later on that the sister, Anna, was called for by the oldest of my grandfather, the two children that were with him, to come back because his wife died at 29 and he had two little boys and he needed someone to take care of her. What I don't know is how he knew where she was to get her. And if that's the case, why didn't he get them right away? I don't know those answers. So he sends for her and she lives with him. And then he sends for Albert, who's the middle one, maybe 4 months later. And they're all a happy family. But my father is still in the orphanage. And I could not find when he came back to the United States. And that's when I Googled, how do you say Charles in Italian? And when I Googled it, immediately came up a manifest with his name. And he came back to the United States in 1934. He had always told us it was Mussolini's war. It was before World War II. And they were starting to recruit. And that's when they found out that he was an American citizen. I don't know.
So he wasn't obligated.
Nope. And so at 15 and a half, he was sent back to the United States. And I believe because of the addresses, I believe that he did stay with his family. Okay. The 4 children from my grandmother's first marriage, they stayed with a Damo family in Italy. I found a record of the oldest daughter had a passport. And on the passport was her 3 siblings. And it did say in 1919, her mother took her across to Italy. But that's all it says. They did not find their way back. Maybe, I think it was in 1928 that they found their way back. I was able to find my first cousins, who I've spoken to. I called one of them because my sister remembered a story, and I just pursued. I called funeral homes, I called cemeteries, and I called her and I told her who I was, and she's elderly, hard of hearing, and she couldn't hear me on the phone very well. And she said, I had an Uncle Charlie. I don't know what happened to him. And we're going on and on, questions. And I gave her some more information. And then she asked me what my mother's name was. And I said, Florence. And she said, I have pictures of your parents. She said, wow. I have a picture of your father. He was in the Aleutian Islands in Alaska during the war. She said, I have a picture of him in his army suit, which we have never seen. So I haven't met them yet. I'm waiting for my sister to come in from Tennessee, and we're going to go make a trip. And in the meantime, I also found another cousin who has 6 siblings, 6 sisters. And I called her sister. I was able to get one of the numbers, and she kind of dismissed me. I don't know, Rovetto's a common name, and I don't know, we're not related, and I don't know, my sister likes to do this. And I called a second time. Again, she kind of dismissed me. Long story short, they were related to us. And so she's my second or third cousin. Anyway, so I have been in contact with them as well. My cousin Elaine was always told by her father's brother that my grandfather had a wife in Italy and a wife in the United States.
I've heard that before.
Have you?
Yes, I've heard it a couple of times.
I have no record of his first wife, who would be my aunt. I have no record of her death. I have no record. I have my grandmother's, I have her birth certificate and her death certificate. The index shows that she was married twice. It says it on there, actually. But we were able to get the certificate from the town of Patti that shows her death certificate, but that doesn't say my grandfather's name as her married name. I've tried all of the Catholic churches in New Jersey. They have no record. They've sent me letters. New Jersey has no record of their marriage. My cousin thought that maybe they got married in Boston because he remembers hearing that story. Massachusetts has no record of their marriage. So I don't know how this might affect us getting dual citizenship because I have no record. So that, other than that, I have every piece of information I need. And we would be going under my grandfather because he was never naturalized. He died, and he was only here, and he died in 1918. So we're pursuing it. And so that's the story of two sisters.
Yeah. So did I catch it right earlier? Did I don't know if it was your grandfather, somebody, did he marry the sister?
He was married to my aunt. Her name is Fabrania. He was married to her. And they were married in 1902. I have a copy of their marriage certificate. Okay, but she never came back over. So I don't even know if the cross out meant that she came over and was rejected, which is what my cousin thought, or she never came over. I don't know that.
Right. And the reason I asked was my uncle, not only did he marry his first cousin, but I guess it was probably around 1905, 6, somewhere around there. She passed away, and I don't think they had any children. She passed away, and he married her sister.
And that's a similar situation.
Yeah.
And I get that, but we don't know that they were married. And my cousin said because he was very close with my grandmother's first child, okay, and they called her Aunt Tilly, and she told him that her mother never would have been with my grandfather if they weren't married. So if that's the case, then where were they married?
We'll be right back.
Experience Italy like never before, traveling with a scheduled group or create your own bespoke tour with friends with philitaly.com. Pack your bags and follow Phil. That's www.philitaly.co.
Yeah, that's going to be that's tough to figure out if you tried all those places already. Yeah.
Right, and the thing is also that my aunt, we cannot find a death record for her. We are assuming that if she never came back to the United States, she stayed in her town. I found her two brothers, and I found my grandfather's death certificate, but in that town, she's not. I can't find a death certificate for her. We've inquired in the community, but we haven't heard anything yet. We're waiting, but there's nothing indexed. So maybe she remarried. Maybe she died in another. I have no idea.
Is that the one that she went back on the boat?
No, this is the first one. The one that we don't even know she ever got on the boat.
Okay.
Yeah. Because we're very curious, depending on when she died, if my grandparents if he really did have two wives, or if she died and they just got together because their first child was born in 1913. And her first husband died in 1912. So
now your father comes back. He's 15 and a half. So who did he live with?
We believe that he lived with his older brother, which would really be his half brother. Right. They all lived together. And we do know, there's a few things we know that we remember, is that he taught himself to speak English because he's a little boy.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I was just talking about this. He sounded like he just came off the boat, okay? But growing up, it's all I knew. I never thought of it that way because that's how he spoke. So I didn't think of him as being like so heavily Italian. Now here's the I want to say the kicker of the whole thing, but my father at 28 years old converted to Judaism when he met my mother. So he was circumcised at 28, and he was very close to my grandparents, and he converted to Judaism. Now, he grew up in a Catholic, I want to call it an orphanage, a monastery. We knew it was in Messina, many years ago, my sister went on a trip with her friends, and she went to Messina, and there was no orphanage there, and she walked around, but we don't actually know, but that's what we were told. That's where it was. We do know that he credited the nuns for teaching him. He was a printer. They taught him a profession, his livelihood, his occupation, which he eventually had his own shop in the city. Always struggled, but he had his own shop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's something. Yeah. Now, so that's funny because I just interviewed a guy in Italy who's Jewish, and he's 36, and he didn't find out he was Jewish until he was 30.
Wow.
So his parents, and I said, Davide, what, and he said they were trying to protect me because I guess, and he's not from a small place in Italy. He's over by, I think, Genoa. But, because, I know there's large Jewish populations in Italy.
Yeah.
But yeah, they kept it. They kept it from him for all of these years. The other interesting thing that he told me, because I asked him, I said, well, was it because of the war? Did your parents say anything about it because of the war? And, is that why they, were nervous or whatever? And, he really doesn't know. But the one thing that he did say was that his uncle, when the Nazis were there, his uncle dressed as a priest and used to walk the streets. We walked past the Nazis.
Well, that would make sense, but that would make sense if that's why they kept it from him.
That's the only thing I could think of is that for maybe they had such bad memories and everything that they kept it from him.
Mm-hmm.
And so and he said basically they used to take me to church,
mm-hmm.
and it was only when he started doing, which is unusual in Italy because most Italians don't do that kind of research. It was only when he started doing the research that he found out that both sides of his family, one side was from, going back was from Spain, the other side was from Austria. And then he had this Jewish roots. So that's interesting with your father.
So I did my DNA, and when my granddaughter, who's now 15, but when she did her DNA, it came up Netherlands, Switzerland. I mean, countries that we could not figure out. I mean, the other side of our family is like Irish and Scotland, but countries, 55% was Amsterdam or one of them. Anyway, when I did my DNA, I didn't have to pay for this because I knew exactly what it was going to be. 50% European Jew, 50% Southern Italy, Sicilian. Just what I thought.
So where's your mom from?
My mom's from New Jersey, but my grandmother is from Ukraine, Moldova.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And my grandfather was from Poland. And what's interesting is I found between families...
Which switched back and forth so many times.
Exactly. I went on a riverboat cruise many years ago, and I had my grandmother's, I didn't know it was Cyrillic at the time, birth certificate. And we went to Bulgaria and Romania, because that's what we always thought she was from, Romania. And she read the birth certificate from me. And yeah, the lines were drawn differently there. But it's interesting because it was so easy. I wouldn't say easy. It was easier for me to find when my grandmother was from a town called Patti in Messina. My grandfather was from Comiso, because Patti actually responded right away and said he's not from here. He's from Comiso, which is really Ragusa area, but still in that area.
Yeah.
And I was so able to match up the manifest and the dates. But with my grandparents, my maternal, my grandmother's name, Esther Tannenbaum, I think I finally could say that this is really her on the manifest. But my grandfather was Max Klein. Do you know how many Max Kleins there are?
I was just going to say, it must be a million.
And we think that he had shortened his name. We cannot find it. But what's also interesting is that when this first started, my sister always knew her name. My sister's name is Corinne. And she always knew from my mom that she was named after my father's mother, who was Conchetta. And my mother didn't want to name her to be called Connie, so she named her Corinne. And then my sister says to me, well, what was our brother named? Who was our brother named after? I said, Corinne. His name was Paul. I guess that's who the grandfather's name was. But we didn't know until I found out that my grandfather's name was Halo.
Mm-hmm.
And the other interesting thing is that I always remember him telling me, my maiden name is Rovetti with an I, and his name is Rovetto. And my cousins that I found are Rovetto. And I always remember him saying he changed the vowel, but I don't know why. My sister has no recollection of that. But of course, when I found his manifest, it's Collegio Rovetto. His birth certificate is the same. And now I have something going on where it has to match, because his marriage papers are Rovetti. My parents were divorced. His divorce papers are Rovetti. My name is Rovetti. So now I have to prove that he is like one and the same person for the citizenship.
Yeah, right. Yeah. They
And
have to be right on.
Yeah. So, we've gotten a lot of the paperwork. It's like amazing how much I've gotten so far. But it's just a few things. But the one piece that we need is the marriage certificate. And we can't find it. And maybe it just doesn't exist.
I suppose it's possible, or it got destroyed, or it got lost. I don't know what they do in that case. So now, did you do anything? I'm trying to. I did living DNA. I did living DNA besides Ancestry, and they give you.
I don't know what living DNA
Yeah,
is.
it's another DNA company, if you will.
Okay.
Like Ancestry. The difference is they don't have as many people matching cousins. I did it because I thought I'd find a lot more Italian cousins, which I didn't, because they're based in Switzerland. But what they do is they trace your mother line and father line. So, and in your case, you would only get a mother line, of course. But the interesting thing about that is my mother's family from Patti, her mother line is almost 95% from the Caucasus.
Mm-hmm.
So, when you do the autosomal test, you get from both sides of the family, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you do the other one, then they break it out, and I was shocked to find out that way back when several maybe 1,000 years or 2,000 years or whatever, they came from the Ukraine. Oh, they came from the Caucasus.
And what is that called? Living
DNA. Yeah. I think, if I remember, you might be able to send your file from Ancestry to them. But I don't remember. I did the test because, like I said, I thought, Italians don't do DNA tests. Very, very few. And probably because they don't need to.
Thing.
Well, probably because they don't need to. I guess,
right.
We're Italian. And it's funny because my wife is half Sicilian and half Puerto Rican. And the Puerto Ricans, every Puerto Rican's done a DNA test. She's got, I'm not kidding, she must have at least 10,000 cousins on Ancestry. So I don't know why, but it is interesting when you get the results back.
I don't know if you could see this, but can you see this?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay, so from somebody that didn't think I had any family, okay, to find out that my father his birth certificate says 10 children, but in truth, my grandparents together didn't have 10 children because they were both married to different people. Right, but there were 10 children total, and one of them passed away. The other kind of mystery is that my aunt, who was still in Italy in 1910, she had a little boy named Salvatore Rovetto, and it names on that as my grandfather as the father, which seems to me to be impossible because he was in the United States, unless he made a quick trip there. But maybe she had wanted to put somebody down as the father. That's what I'm thinking. That's exactly what I'm thinking, because if he came back into the United States, he could be back on a manifest, and he's not. And I can't imagine they'd have the money to be traveling back and forth like that.
I'm sure they didn't. So maybe that was it. Maybe she just wanted to name a father. And I found out something really incredible, and I think they could still do it. In the 50s and 60s, the Italian mothers didn't have to claim the child. they could give it to an orphanage and not have their name on the birth certificate.
I just got something today from that about that. I knew
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, isn't that wild?
And I wondered,
And
because
I asked John. I said, well, what about the father? And he went, the father. He said, we're talking about Italy.
now I lost my train of thought what I was going to say.
Oh, sorry. We were talking about you had just found out something.
Oh, I was curious because I grew up. I'm Jewish. I grew up that way, and I wondered if they were married in a church instead of a civil marriage, and that's why I pursued in Hoboken, because it looks like that is the only place they ever lived. At all the Catholic churches, and I said, so if you were married in a church, do you have to report that to the state? And it appears that you do have to report.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
I wasn't too clear on. And the other question I had was, because this was just a total fluke. I called, my cousin said that her father was baptized in St. Anne in Hoboken. I texted the woman, and I told her my father's name and all. And I'm telling you, in 20 minutes, she emailed me back, I found your father's baptism record. I went, get out of here. So she sent it to me, and both of his parents, which are the same names that are listed on his birth certificate, are on his baptism. So I spoke with a genealogist who I said, so here's proof of who, and both said, well, any parent they could put any name on that.
Yeah, right.
So that's going to be our issue, it seems. And this person said to me, you might have to get a court order for the marriage certificate. But how can you get a court order if there never was a marriage certificate? I'm not clear on that.
Yeah, I don't know. I probably should have done it years ago, but I didn't. But I just started looking into the citizenship, and I'm using one of the guys that I interviewed. He's in Florida, but I'm using him to find the records. And now I know my father was born in Scotch Plains, New Jersey. Why they were in Scotch Plains, New Jersey, I have no idea. Mm-hmm. The shop behind me, that was in New York City. But for some reason, the only thing I could think of was that my grandmother's aunt's family lived in New Jersey. So that's probably why they were there for a number of years before they wound up in Corona. But I know he's born in Scotch Plains, New Jersey. I have his, stuff from the service, his, draft card and all of that. It says Scotch Plains on it. They wrote to Scotch Plains, and I said, we don't have a record. So I said, so what happens now? And they said, we'll go to Trenton and, try Trenton and see if they have the birth record there. But it's, we know he was born.
Well, it's interesting because, first of all, the way I found out even that he had any stepbrothers was I looked up my father's military draft card, and his stepbrother is listed on there. He said to my sister, who is Anthony Adamo? And my sister remembers that there were a bunch of children. So the sad part of the story is then he comes back to the United States. I mean, one of the cousins says, because I kept calling him Charlie, and she kept saying, my sisters only knew him as Colergio. So when you were saying Charlie, I had no idea who you were talking about. But, then he gets married, and he has no contact with any of them except for the brother and the aunt and his sister for a little bit. But other than that, it's like, was it too painful for him? He knew he had cousins when he got back there. He got back into Hoboken from Italy. So, those are questions I probably never will know. This cousin that I connected with, she said that Aunt Tilly, who was my grandmother's first child, had recorded this whole story, but we don't know where it is.
Oh, yeah.
And he said she told me that, and he remembered a little bit. He was the one who said to me, it's the story of two sisters, because I found the manifest from when both sisters came over. But I'm like trying to match them up, and it's not making any sense to me. The minute he told me they were two sisters, the whole story made sense to me. So it's kind of sad. He had all this family, and yet we knew none of them, or just a few cousins, and then nothing. So
Yeah,
I don't
well,
know.
and they didn't talk a lot about it. I mean, I never knew I had any family in Italy,
Mhm.
and I've just recently found, first cousins once removed, second cousins,
Yeah, yeah.
whatever, that I had no idea.
Mhm.
Nobody ever mentioned it, and in fact, one of them from my grandmother's half sisters, he said that his mother told him that my grandmother used to send stuff over.
Mhm.
Never had a clue of any of that. My father never mentioned it. My father's parents died when I was young, so I never, and not that I would have asked anyway.
So
Who's over there?
would you qualify for?
I qualify because my grandfather did naturalize, but he naturalized after my father was born.
After he was born. Okay.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
so we're okay, but I could go through my mother's family if I had to. I mean, I got everybody was Italian in my family, so I
Right.
got so many roots.
There's something with a
1948.
1940. Yeah. So
1948.
on the
Yeah,
mother's side, that's why
yeah.
it was easier on the father's side to do. Oh, my
Yeah.
grandfather's side.
And I just learned through one of my other interviews something that I didn't know. Uh, because the consulates are so backed up because of COVID and everything, there are three ways to do it. One is through the consulate in the United States, which takes
Mhm.
forever. The second way is to go live in Italy for 45 days,
Right.
right? But there's a third way now because I think the consulates had 60 or 90 days. Or there was a time period on when they had to give you an appointment or get back to you or something like that. And since they cannot make that now, that you could petition the court in Italy.
It's kind of like suing the court, right?
Almost, kind of, yeah.
Because I heard about this.
Yeah. So the court could grant you the citizenship because the consulate can't do it in a timely fashion.
So it's interesting also because my sister lives in Tennessee. So because of that, the consulate for her is in Detroit. I'm in New York. Okay.
Yeah.
So, but what's interesting is if we were in the same place, we wouldn't need two sets of all of this paperwork. Okay.
Right,
So
right.
actually, the consulate in Detroit is less demanding on the paperwork than in New York.
Really?
So she has an appointment for 2020, I don't know, I think it's 2024, 2026. Now in New York, it has not been open, but I don't know, I hit on something and it says that I have a number 487 or something like that. And I don't actually know if that means that I'm actually on a list of a date. I'm not really sure.
Oh, yeah. I don't
But
know.
I mean, truthfully, like I said, we have all of I'm still waiting for my marriage papers from New York State. Yet I got from Patti, the little community in Patti, I have that paperwork. New York State, I'm still waiting for. It's supposed to come this week. And then they have to be apostilled, which means in New Jersey and in New York, and then translated into Italian, the ones that are not. So it's an enormous.
It's an arduous process. Yeah.
It really is. It really is.
I have a friend. She did it. Boy, she's in Italy now. I think she's there 3 years. And she did it pretty much all herself.
Yes, so have we. Yeah.
And she did it in Los Angeles. And she got to the consulate, and there was a discrepancy with her grandfather's name or something. I guess something minor. And you have to go back. You have to make another appointment and everything. So she started crying, and the guy told her, "Come back in 2 weeks, and I'll take care of it." I said, "Yeah, well, I don't think if I cried, I don't think it's going to work." I said, "You cry."
You never know.
Story.
You never know.
I never really thought about doing it. Now I want to do it because I figure it'll be good for the kids. They'll always have that option if they want to go there and spend some time there or whatever.
Yeah. My sister and I we've contacted somebody who will go with you to the town. He'll meet the mayor. He'll take you to the cemetery. He'll take you to the records of the town where your family is from. So we are thinking about doing that. Maybe in September. My sister's just first retiring. Maybe in
I'm going
September
in. We're going in 2 weeks. We had to cancel twice,
because of
because of
COVID.
COVID. Yeah, yeah. So we're going in. We're going in 2 weeks, and I'm working with. They've really been fantastic. Italy Rooting, Letizia Sinisi, and
What is it?
her name. It's Italy Rooting. I'll send you a link.
Send me a link.
I'll
Yeah.
send you the link.
Okay.
And they're setting up all of these tours because my father's mother was from nobility, and so we're going to some of their houses are still there.
Wow.
And I'm going to meet some of the cousins that I never knew existed. And
Now, where
this
is this?
whole
You
thing.
said in Bari?
My mother was from Bari. My father's family is from Naples.
Where is Bari from?
Bari
Where
is
that?
is Puglia, so on the
Okay.
Adriatic. Yeah,
Okay.
over on that side. And we were going to go there too, but I had to make a choice whether to go there or go to Sicily. So we're going to go to Sicily for a few days too, so my wife could see where she's from. And so yeah, we'll be in Naples. We're going to Capricotta. We're going to Montebello because my grandmother's great grandparents. That's where they had their place, and I didn't notice beforehand. The nobility didn't spend any time in these towns. They lived in Naples.
Right.
They would go once or twice a year to these places, and I guess collect the money, and then they went back to Naples.
Right.
And that's
Do you
where they
speak
lived.
Italian?
I don't. I wish I did.
I'm taking it now, and it is.
I'm trying, but I'm not. I'm horrible at languages.
I am too, and she's wonderful. It's through a U of T from my union. The only problem is, it's total with the articles, and I really just want conversational. It's just way over my head. I mean, I've gotten a little, but it's tough.
Yeah, it is. It's very, very tough. Well, listen, Linda, this has been fabulous. A great story for sure. I mean,
Right?
one that I hadn't heard before. So that's
Crazy.
always interesting.
Yes.
So I appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you. And you know what? If you could send me any links, anything that might be helpful that you know of.